Krista, it's so good to be with you. Thank you so much. I just wanted to share as we get started, I'm so incredibly grateful to get to honor you and just want to share what an influence you and your work have had on me personally and on Jewish Studio Project, and how often I've turned to your voice and your interviewees and your incisive and probing and grounded and inquisitive question asking to help support me in my own question asking, and how often we draw from your interviews for sources in our tech studies. So I just wanted to start by saying thank you.
Oh, thank you. Means a lot.
We are celebrating 10 years of Jewish Studio Project and accessing and activating creativity as a force for spiritual connection and social change. And I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit about how you understand creativity and the power of creativity.
We really came into this century with a need to remake a lot of our institutions, our ways of being with each other. Our technologies have changed everything. And so we have to remake our structures for them to inhabit this world with their heart intact and with accessibility to that. And I started thinking about how we're all kind of called to be social creatives in this time. I would say Jewish Studio Project is spiritual creativity, and it's social creativity too, because I think it's reinvigorating that link between who we are and what is our presence in the world, and wanting that to be more generative, more hospitable, and more vibrant, in fact, with the depths of the tradition that so speak to what the world needs and is longing for. I was recently with my colleague and teacher, John Paul Lederach, who is a peace builder. And he's somebody who for 40 years has been behind the scenes in Northern Ireland, in Colombia, in South Africa, when society's transformatively healed. And he's never the person whose name is famous or who's on stage receiving awards for that. But one of the things he said to me recently, and I haven't stopped thinking about it, it feels so relevant to your question and to your mission, really. There's a world to make, there's transformation that's needed, and then, there are things that we're working against or resisting. He said the most intuitive thing in a way is to resist. And of course, we need forms of resistance to all kinds of things. But he said that the danger of that is that when you're in a mode of resistance, you actually shape yourselves around the thing that you're resisting. And he said when he has seen societies transform in healing ways, like when he's seen the world repaired in some way, the people who step forward who make that happen are like social artists. It's the creativity that does that, not at all just the response to what needs to change.
Thank you. That was so beautiful. We talk so much in Jewish Studio Project and in this work about taking it off the page, that the page is really a place to practice being with the unknown, being with what's emerging, being with frustration as something doesn't look the way you want it to, and continuing to stay with it as it changes and transforms into something else. So just echoing what you said about taking it then off the page and into the real matter of our lives, right? And what a blessing it is to get to honor you with the Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh Award. As you know, this is one of the primary names of God in Jewish tradition, and the way in which God self-identifies to Moses at the burning bush when Moses is being tasked to bring the people out from this narrow Mitzrayim, this narrow place, into an open expanse. And Moses says, well, who should I tell them is sending me? And God says, tell them, Ehyeh Asher Ehyeh is sending you to them. And I'm always moved by the fact that we might expect God to say this strong force or this warlike God, or even God solid as a rock. But what God says is, tell them, I will be that which I will be is sending you to them. And I'm wondering what that evokes for you and what this particular award or this name of the divine means to you in this moment.
Well, I'll tell you something that I'm not sure I ever wrote down in public, but I started my show Inside Public Radio, and initially it was called Speaking of Faith, which was a title that was kind of invented in the newsroom because there was this idea public radio needs to be able to speak about religion. And in fact, it was a very radical move 25 years ago. But what I started to realize very quickly is that the word faith, it's a word that's very meaningful for some people and very problematic for others. And it's also really Christian. It's not even a Jewish word, right? It's not a Muslim word. It's not a Buddhist word. And so I started to, it was about 7 years before I was able to rename the show, and people were listening nevertheless, but they were having to get over the word faith, and I was like, "That's not what a name should do," right? So, then we went through this process, and I found it, I didn't completely control this process, but this word being just kept rising up, and there was a lot of criticism of it, that it was just so vague, and also I think a concern I had for, our very devout religious listeners is that it would sound like we were that it could sound like we were opening it so wide. But for me, the defining thing about using that language was precisely this, everyone doesn't think this when they hear it, but it is also the name of God, right? The name God gives God's self. And whether everybody knows that or not, I think that is true. And it is held in that word, that English word. So it means, everything to me. And I also just, at that moment, and God saying God's name as something that will continue to show itself or be able for us, I think the other way we can understand that is that our capacity to see and understand what God is will continue to grow, hopefully, if we're growing, but something dynamic, right? And very much alive, and as alive as we are. So something that we continue to meet and that continues to meet us, even as the world at times becomes unrecognizable. I spent my 20s in Cold War Berlin when it was still divided. And so I lived through a moment where the world changed unimaginably. Just with such drama. And what that did for me, that is with me now, is knowing that, that nothing is final and that there will be a beyond of this. And so I think this matter of being social creatives, social healers, and again, creativity is part of healing. It just is. It's baked into it. We are called to be this even as we can't see exactly what will happen next or what the timeline for all of this is. But it matters that we are creators now and healers now.
Thank you. It's really beautiful. I need that today. You've had the privilege and the honor of talking to so many diverse and amazing thinkers over the years, and of getting to sort of curate this community of people. And I'm wondering, from all the folks that you've spoken to, or kind of what feels most live for you now around creativity that you've drawn from different folks or different conversations that you've had.
What came to mind for me was John Lewis, who I don't think would have thought of himself as a creative. But the way he said, you imagine the world, like for him, it was the beloved community, that the beloved community is real. And I feel like that language and that image cuts through all, the best of all of our traditions. And you live as if it is true, which to me is this muscular hope, right? That hope is not a wish. It is a living as if in order to make something real. And, so all of the things we're talking about, all the things you're doing, is living as if, right? It is actually making that world that we want to inhabit, that we want our children to inhabit. I guess the other thing that comes to mind is how beauty as a moral value has come through again and again and again. And, not that we have a lot of superficial ways of doing beauty culturally, but again, beauty and then, learning that in the natural world, beauty is a sign of vitality, right? It's a marker that there's life here, and even like a certain kind of safety here, or like livability. That's what surfaces for me.
Well, I would love to know, as we move towards closing, like what blessing or hope might you offer the Jewish Studio Project community, this community of people who have drawn on and are looking towards, the future, the next decade and beyond, who see creativity as so central to our own lives and then making the world a better place. What blessing might you offer this community in this
Oh,
moment?
such a beautiful question. I interviewed Rabbi Ariel Berger a few years ago, and one of the things we talked about was the matter of blessing and what a piece of beauty and intelligence that is from tradition. And I think it was after that conversation with him that at some point I personally fell into this practice of, when I've had a meaningful encounter with someone, whether it was a stranger or someone I love and know, often saying blessings when I leave them. And I've experienced, and I don't think that would have been natural to me earlier in my life, but it does feel natural. I think sometimes it surprises people because it's not that normal, but I often experience that people receive it. There's something about it that they receive it as a real gift, right? It feels big. And I want to encourage you to know yourselves as social creatives and healers, and how absolutely interwoven and mutually reinforcing those things are, and that is precisely what our world needs. And I think it's a hard time because there's so much change and so much uncertainty, which is so difficult for, our bodies experience uncertainty as threat and fear. And there's already enough to be afraid of, like just outright. So I think power of naming that difficulty, it's actually a tool for bringing this reality in our bodies to consciousness so that we are a little bit less captive to our nervous system and the fear response taking over. So it's just another example of this power of naming that is so that intelligence is in the tradition and in the text. I guess, I want to honor that and name that and encourage you to name it and claim it, right, in its beauty and its power, this calling that you are taking up, this form of healing, repairing the world, because that's what this is. And I guess I would just, say, I offer this with my blessings. And I'm so honored to be honored by you.
Thank you, Krista.
I mean, really, it's beautiful for me to think that now I'm part of this thing that
You
you're
are.
creating and giving life. So that is a great blessing to me.